Love it. All right, you want me to jump in?
Yeah, we will get started. So thank you everybody for joining us today. In today's highly competitive market space, building a strong brand is more critical than ever. And we really truly believe that customer insights is the exact way to be able to achieve your goals and be able to really strengthen that relationship that you have with customers. And we're thrilled that you're here today because that means that you too really understand the value of creating a two-way relationship with customers to not only strengthen your brand and reinforce its messaging, but also to set you apart from your customers and competitors. So we're going to jump in and get started.
I love that. Yes. All right,
Clicking the
Kate.
wrong button. There we go. All right. So what is brand building? So really with brand building, there's so much time that then goes on, like the deep work that happens internally behind closed doors, really being able to define what does your brand stand for, what's your values, your mission, how do you want to be seen and perceived in the marketplace? And that is really like one of the core starting points of a brand as you start to be able to put that externally out there. So you put all this time, money, and effort into activities like marketing and PR, advertising, really to be able to externally communicate how you wanted your brand to be seen in the marketplace, out there into the world. But what we really feel like the biggest and most important thing is realizing what the reality is how consumers actually see you. So we can have all the intent of this is how we want to be known, but really what consumers say, so their perception is truly the reality, and that's what we need to dig into. There's this great quote by Scott Cook that says, a brand is no longer what we tell consumers it is, it's what the consumers tell each other it is. So again, it's not even that they're always automatically going to be coming back to us as the brand to say, this is what I think you're trying to say. They're going to be telling everybody else. That's what happens in the power, especially even as social media is taken off. People are always talking. We just have to make sure that we're actively listening, which is the exciting part about consumer insights. So what we want to do is start digging in a little bit here around kind of these three different pillars of brand: internal, external, and then that reality that comes from consumers. And so internally, we want to make sure that we're being authentic to the core of what the brand stands for, but that we're also remembering that we're looking for alignment with the consumer base, because without consumers, our brand is not going to be able to take off and really flourish. And so with that, you want to be able to not only think about what you want, but you also want to be able to think about what your consumer wants. So their wants, their needs, what's the consumer's values, their priorities, their expectations. And then on the external side of things, as a brand, we want to make sure that we're as efficient and effective as possible in our marketing messaging. So we're, again, wanting to be able to authentically be core or true to our core as a brand, but we want to make sure that we're meeting the consumers where they are. So again, that's where tapping into insights around media consumption or their experiences, their lifestyle preferences. What is it that's going to connect your internal messaging with the wants and needs externally of our customer base? And so then how these kind of combined, really to be able to say, what is the brand? How does the brand image and influence come together to be able to really meet those consumers where they are? So when consumers are thinking about our brand, what is their awareness about us? What is their perception about us? What is their engagement or satisfaction with us? These are all different kinds of customer insight data points that can be out, that are already existing out there. And talking about all these different types of things, it's not to overwhelm you because it can feel like a lot of information that we're trying to gather here. But the biggest thing and what we're really excited about talking about today is really talking about how if we are strategic in our efforts and what we're doing, we then can start picking through these. Again, we're not going to be able to touch on every single customer insight automatically out the gate as you start an initiative like this, but we're excited to be able to talk to you about how you can be strategic in using customer insights into your brand efforts.
Love that. Actually, and Kate, if you go back to that slide, one of the things that I just wanted to touch on here is you had mentioned the word authenticity. I think that there's this really powerful place here that we can be digging into. We work with a lot of sales and marketing leaders who are so passionate, and business, nonprofit, all sorts of different type of people that are so passionate about the mission that they serve or the service and the product that they're doing. And it's really, this customer insights world is about opening up that lines of communication and creating an authentic relationship with the people on the other end. So it's shifting our mindset a little bit from thinking about it as we're just going to be pushing information out. We're going to decide internally. You know, I used to work at Home Depot in their marketing department and HSBC and banking and did all this stuff. And we used to sit, say back in my day in the cubicle, where we would then decide what should be the marketing messaging, what do we want it to be without actually going out and talking to people, you know, and that was this huge piece is how do we create this relationship with Wen so we're authentically sharing, but we're incorporating what their lived experience is as well. So I just think that just touching on that authenticity part in order to get and gather all of this information so that we're blending the internal and external together.
Yeah, and I think a good reminder, so thank you for adding that extra context in here, Jen, that is really around the fact that brands that truly want to be able to help consumers feel seen and appreciated and a part of the process in this time that we're able to co-create not just products but experiences. People want connection and they want to feel seen and heard, and they want to know that if they're engaging with you that you actually appreciate that you're not just there for the money, that you're not just there for the sale. And so creating really, again, a true relationship, not just in the fact of the numbers. We always say there is a human, there is a person on the other side of every single transaction, whether that's a sale or an engagement online or something like that. And so really truly appreciating the person that is engaging with your brand and then working to align that is really so important. So thank you for that, Jen.
Before we move on to the, into this slide. So what Katie covered was a lot of different pieces here, right? But she covered the internal, external, the reality of coming together. And there's a lot of different pieces in here of the different types of information that we can be gathering. So one thing, you know, that in this world, all that being said, the navigating the customer insights world can be overwhelming. It can be a very large process to be able to go through with all the different data sets that are out there, all the different touch points, the things that we can do. But if we can come back and we'll walk through our 3-step strategic approach here, is we want to make sure first and foremost that we have a very clear concept of what our overall goal and objective is. And so before we jump right into doing any sort of customer insights project, we believe that in order for it to be most effective and strategic, we need to go through these 3 steps in order to make sure that we can use the results on the back end and it can be used, relevant, actionable, I think is the new term that everyone's using, actionable insights. But we believe that you need to have an overall strategic plan for your customer insights journey, right? Instead of just doing some one-off ad hoc projects that are going on. So first and foremost, we always want to, and we're not going to dig too deep into it today. It can maybe be our next webinar since I think we're trying to chunk these out. But making sure that we know what your overall goal and objective is of taking on your customer insights overall project, but even micro projects as we're doing this, whether or not this is gathering data from your customers or your prospects, donors, that type of thing. If we're jumping into a survey, any of the projects that we're going to take on, these micro projects, we want to make sure that we know what our overall goal and objective is before we start jumping in here. So I just want to set the stage there, because once we know what we're looking to accomplish, and we're going to share some examples of going through this in a little bit, then this is going to be a much easier process that we can then also kind of rinse and repeat and keep going through this again and again. So step 1, and we'll go through each one of these steps as we do this. But step 1 is establishing what we already know. And so we'll go through this a little bit, but this is where we want to leverage the existing data that you already are probably sitting on. So depending on the size, scale, that type of thing of your company, it'll depend on the type of information that you have. But step 1 is establishing what we already know. Step 2 then is establishing what we don't know, right? So we want to make sure that we're using what we already have today in order to establish what we want to do going forward. We don't want to be collecting information that we already have. I know that sounds kind of simple, but I want to repeat that again. We don't want to have to go out and ask our customers or go collect information that we already have. So knowing that a lot of this projects, and sometimes when we find people where they might stumble, is sometimes this information is in silos in different areas in your organization. So part of this is going to be meeting our friends in other departments and other areas in the company. But let's figure out what we already know. Therefore, we can map out to say, okay, what don't we know along the way, and where do we want to be strategic about this? The third piece of that is then how are we going to be proactively going out and gathering the insights, right? This is then. So we want to make sure, because I know a lot of our friends come out and say, let's jump right to step number 3 of how can we collect additional information? How do we gather things? What can we do? We want to make sure that we're 100% doing step 1 and step 2 in this process. Because I want to make sure, and even before we move on here, I think anyone that knows us knows that we are customer insights professionals, obviously, but advocates as well. And as Kate said, if customers want to be a part of the process, but it's also about appreciating them, of who they are and what they're doing. And we need to make sure when our customers are talking to us, giving us information, whether that's going, doing a survey or going on our website or doing these things, that we're appreciating that, we're gathering, and that we're not going to then, we want to respect their time. We don't want to be asking for the same information. So let's make sure that having a strategic approach will make sure that things are intentional and aligned as we move forward.
Yeah, I think a great point too, just to add in here, Jen, before we move on to the next slide, is just really remembering, and this is really difficult within a very fast-paced world that we're living in right now. Things move, gosh, I don't even know, like at just the speed of light, it seems like, and there's so much change. And so a lot of times we're feeling reactive instead of proactive. And we truly believe, and it is difficult, and so we fully acknowledge that slowing down to be able to speed up is really important. And so when we can create enough time and space to actually, again, as Jenny said, figure out what you already know, what you don't know, then you're able to be more strategic. And we truly believe that you can jump forward in your efforts if you take a little bit more extra time in the beginning to be more strategic about things. So again, it's just that concept around to slow down, to speed up actually does make a lot of sense if you can actually do that and map that into your time schedule.
Exactly.
Jump forward here, Jen.
All right, so in our 3-step strategic approach of what we do, we want to make sure that we're establishing what we already know. So here's the deal, and I said this before, but on average, there's some research that just came out that we had from last year that on average, companies are using only 35% of the existing company customer data that they have. So I just want to say that again. Companies are typically only using 35% of the data that they have on their customers. So most companies are sitting on a tremendous amount of information already that isn't being used to its fullest potential. And to that point, there was a CMO study around marketers, and 87% of marketers say that data is the company's most underutilized asset. That's a huge, huge piece here. So what we want to be able to do, and I just want to share those stats of 1, you are not alone if you're not utilizing all the data that you have, because there's quite a few people out there. And as Katie said, there's just more and more coming in every day, probably every minute. Of where we are, but let's slow down to figure out what do we have. And we want to make sure that we're taking full advantage and breaking down the silos of where we might have some of this information. So part of this is, where are we gathering data? So I want to start this out in the beginning and saying there's so many different ways that we can gather data. The first one that we have listed here, some common data sources, are surveys. Right. And that's a big thing that Kate and I do, or that we do here at McKinsey, is surveys. But when we say customer insights, that is not only surveys. So we are gathering information from our customers on a wide variety, or prospects, donors, whatever we want to call this term here. But we're gathering information from them on a wide variety of places, like marketing metrics. What are they responding to? What are they not responding to? What's going on? What are they purchasing? So sales and sales purchase, or purchase history, where are they going? I know when I used to work at Home Depot, we had reports all the time where we knew exactly, and we worked on the B2B. I worked on the B2B side of it. So we were selling to large hotels and office buildings, healthcare places, those type of things. So they were purchasing a large quantity of things, maybe not, 1 roll of toilet paper. They were purchasing 1,000 of them. But we would go through and we would watch, and we knew if they purchased on a regular basis, and we knew if they didn't purchase every 3 months and it started to get to that 4-month mark, 5-month, we were potentially getting a lapsed customer. They were talking to us and telling us without telling us exactly what was happening if we were watching closely. So we can start going through and saying, what are the patterns? Who are we losing? What's our attrition rate? What's happening in here? What are they buying? What have they bought before and not bought? So we want to make sure that we're going in and digging into this, right? That's telling us about what they're doing. A second piece or another piece in here is, and this is just a small snippet of the places that you can gather information, your call center, CRM records. I want to make sure that we are not overlooking customer-facing team members that you have. There's so much valuable information from conversations that your customer-facing people are having. These are frontline workers, whether they're not out there in the field, whether they're on the phone, whatever your type of businesses that you have. Let's make sure that we're mining that information, right? Are we looking at what the conversations are? Is this logged in here, or is this just gathering this feedback in here of what's going on, what's working, what's not working, those types of things. We also have website activity. If you've got some tracking in there of where people are going, what are they doing, social media channels. There's so much information that we can be gathering on our customers above and beyond. I just want to say, and we will touch a little bit more on surveys specifically, but I wanted to be able to put this slide in here of where else we might be gathering data. I also wanted to touch on the fact of, and I mentioned it, depending on the size, sophistication of your organization, you might have different levels of data that you have and how you're using this. But one of the questions sometimes that we get is, where do I even start? So one, we provided this. And I also just wanted to share that on our website, we've got just a free download of data inventory checklist that gives you a bit more information that you can download if you start taking this. And one of the challenges, or one of the opportunities, I guess I'll say, is to use this exercise in order to break down silos and go and chat with other departments and say, what do you have? What's going on? Because a lot of times right hand and left hand is not necessarily talking to themselves within an organization. All right, so we were talking about where are we gathering data? So we've got data that's out there. Where is it? The next piece that we want to be moving into is what is this information telling us, right? So we've got all of this information. And also, I also want to step back for a second, and I am glad there's a lot of buzzwords in the marketing space. For a while there, I think, Kate, everyone was talking about big data, big data. Now it's AI and some other things that we're talking about. But for a while, it was big data. I got to figure out how to use it, what's happening. And part of it, I would go in and I would chat with people. I said, do you actually know where your customers are coming from? And do you know who your customers are? Like, this doesn't have to be, when we're talking about data sets, this doesn't have to be hundreds and thousands or millions of records. This can even be, who are your 100 customers? Who are your 1,000? Whatever the number is, let's make sure that we're really understanding who these people are. So just to also reiterate that we don't have to have millions and millions of records in order to be able to do this. This could be at whatever size. So what is this data telling us? To come back even to the theme in the beginning that we're talking about, brand building, customer insights, how to leverage customer insights for brand building. Some of the pieces, and Katie on that beginning showed us internal, external reality. At least we're going to dig into just a couple examples here and start drilling in so that we can tangibly look at this. So some things that some of the data could be telling us about is things like their awareness of your organization, perception, your customers' perception, understanding of what's happening in here, engagement, satisfaction. This is the type of information that we can figure out what this type of information and data is telling us in here. Because we want to make sure that we're not repeating this. So now if we move forward, now we want to establish what we already know. So let's say we went through, we did our audit, we went through and we took a look at a lot of different information that we have in here. And we came through and we said, okay, we've got our roadmap. And let's just, for this example, we know what our awareness is. And we also know what our satisfaction is based on our customers or our prospects that we have today. This is our hypothetical today of what we've got going on here. So as we go down this path, let's say that we don't know what our perception, understanding, or engagement is in here. A few different things that we might not know about what's going on. All right, so now we want to be able to come in here and start filling in the gaps, right? We want to say, what is it that we want to know? So now we know at the top. And for this example, let's say we are working with, because we want to make sure we've got a clear goal and objective, marketing department. I'm assuming that's some of the people that are logging in here today and that we work with. Marketing departments want to know, as you're spending money, resources, time, building out your marketing messaging, is it landing the way that you believe it is? In this example. So, for perception, if we want to know, hey, what's the assumption or what's our perception of the people out there? If we have a tagline that we're working on and we believe that it means this, is it landing at the same time out there? We work on those types of projects with people. Also, do people even know that you exist, that your organization exists? And what is their perception? And also in here, Kate's going to dig into a lot more for perception. But, in thinking about it, and thinking a little bit about this morning and yesterday, it's also using and kind of swapping out that word of assumption. What do people assume about you? So this could be people that currently use your product, and that might be what is their understanding of what it is, but also perception. And it could be perception around your product, services, your category, those kind of things that Kate's going to dig in here. So we want to make sure as we're going through, if we're a marketing department, we're working on our marketing messaging, what's going to be out there. We want to know what the perception is that's going on.
Yeah, and I think just really quick on that one too, again, thinking about the different types of people who have joined us this morning, is also thinking about, it's not just the perceptions sometimes around like your product or your business itself, but also even if we're thinking even in like a nonprofit space, what is the perception of the challenge or the societal issue that you're facing or that you're working to kind of solve for? So perception around, let's say, family homelessness versus homelessness. And is there a difference in the general population's perception of those two kind of nuances, or do they group those together, or those types of things? So again, as we think even about perception, it is a complex thing. And so it's not to add more complexity in here, but again, and we'll chat more as we keep going, but the importance of being more strategic as we dig apart, of really being able to say and understand and unpack each one of these types of layers that goes into building that brand's reality from the consumer or general population's base around awareness, perception, understanding, is that then there's a lot of complexity that comes into each one of those types of things as well.
I know too, Kate, just for example purposes, because I think that they're helpful. Sometimes we had done kind of two different surveys, but one was around in a B2B and doing business in a certain space, right? And so it was, how is it to do business with us? Like, what are the challenges to do business? This was in a B2B space. And some of the respondents came back and said, it's difficult to do business, like it's a hard process to switch accounts, to do this kind of thing. And I remember when we were reporting out and doing the results, and some of the internal folks were saying, well, that's not true. That's not true. It's super easy. This isn't true. And I said, one, if it's not true and it actually is easy to do business with you, that's a beautiful thing. That's a marketing message. Like, how do we now make sure that people know how easy it is? But if the perception out there is it's difficult to switch, it's difficult to work with you, they're not going to purchase from you if that's the perception that they have. So instead of maybe in theirs and in their case, instead of talking about the all of these tactical benefits that they were going to be showcasing about after they switch, like these are all the benefits that you get from being a customer with us. We were saying, hey, I think in your marketing, in your marketing message, in order to get people to make that leap, you need to be talking about how easy it is to make the switch and make these kind of changes. So understanding the perception out there and not just what the reality is or what you believe the reality is internally is a really, really good way of getting there. Okay, so how are we? So we've established what we know. We're going to go out there. We're going to do an audit from a bunch of different places. Then we're going to talk about identify what we don't know. So now we are trying to figure out, in this case, we want to be able to do brand perception. Brand perception is what we want to be digging into. And now we can get to the step of how do we want to proactively fill in the gaps. So I just want to say here again, there are multiple ways of gathering data on and customer insights in addition to just customer feedback opportunities or surveys per se. So before we jump directly to here, there are a lot of different ways that we can be gathering insights from people, but we want to make sure that we're looking at this strategically and figuring out what the best way to connect with people so that they know that we're engaging with them and moving forward. So in this case, we'll be going down the path a little bit more. We can do a lot of topics in webinars, but we figured let's zoom in on how we're filling in the gaps for customer feedback opportunities in regards to insights. Because oh yeah, is this?
Oh, yeah, that's okay. I think really the biggest thing that we want to make sure that we talk about when it comes to research is really asking the right people the right questions at the right time. That is something that you will hear those of us at McKinsey say over and over and over again. And really the biggest thing then, so to bring this kind of image to life is, as you know, the customer journey is not a linear one, and we don't want to kitchen sink or throw a million questions to somebody at the right time. So even if it's a perception of or a brand usage question, you don't want those types of survey questions going out to somebody in the very beginning after they just purchased. Is that something you want to be asking them later on? So really being able to map out, again, when we think about insights gathering opportunities, not just surveys, but is this the rest of this time together, we're going to talk a little bit more about the survey side of ways to collect customer insights, but really it's being able to actually map out what your customer journey is and then overlay that of all the different types of insight opportunities where you can start to gather them. So again, even as Jenny talked about, like marketing efforts, you don't just market at the top of the funnel, you market at the bottom of the funnel as well, and then try to create repeat information. Where do people call in? Where are they at in their journey for call center data? So it becomes layered, and it again can be complex, but really coming down and strategizing about how you're going to do and collect different information is super important. And so really it's then looking at, is it a brand awareness or perception? Perception and awareness and understanding are kind of different nuances around that kind of same element in terms of your brand. And you want to be able to measure, how does somebody's perception or understanding of your brand change as they go from a prospect to a customer, and then along their customer journey, does that change? We have purchase driver surveys that you could be doing, product usage surveys. So again, really the biggest thing here is understanding the complexity, but then really being strategic and knowing that we're not wanting to throw every single survey or every single question set in there at the same time. And so again, as we're going to dig in a little bit more here, because we truly believe that brand awareness and brand perception is a survey that really can be so rooted in being able to make more informed decisions as it relates to your marketing efforts. But it is one that we think is not as strategically used as it really should be. We think that it's one that people want to go to experience or satisfaction, right? You want to do that net promoter. How satisfied are you? How likely are you to recommend? That is awesome. And if you can dig in and be able to really understand why someone gives you a 10 or a 3 or something in terms of net promoter, we always want to go deeper than what are people doing, but like why? Like what is that underneath thing? But we really truly believe that creating that relationship and understanding how people feel about your brand and what that perception is, it's going to be able to help with all of your marketing messaging across the whole experience. So we're going to dig more deeply into the brand perception.
And just for a sec, Kate, before you move on here, one of the other things of why having a holistic overall research strategy is a fantastic idea is because each one of these plays off of the other, right? And so this is not then just looking at research in a silo. It's how do we start telling this bigger story of what's going on across the journey that the customer is having, but also over time. Brand awareness and brand perception studies are fantastic trackers to be able to have over time. So this is not also a one and done, like, well, this is it. This is where we are. Here's the deal. The world is changing incredibly fast. People are changing fast, what's happening in their world. And so having a pulse of what's going on and what's changing over time is a really good way to be able to figure out. And also for anybody in charge of marketing budgets, this is really fantastic to be able to say, we did this campaign, where we ran results to say what our awareness is, we ran our campaign, and then we could track afterwards to say pre and post, to say what was the impact of having this campaign. Because I know we worked with one company and they did a ton of marketing, which is amazing, and have done a fantastic job and did their research after. And there was some pretty great awareness scores that happened. And they said, oh my gosh, I wish that we had this ahead of time so we could have tracked to see where we were, to see what was happening. So at least even these are not one and done type of surveys. this is something that we want to have along the journey that's in there. And could be doing over time and tracking and keeping a finger on the pulse of what's going on with our customers.
And I think it's remembering also with this being strategic is laying that even over your overarching strategic plan. Where do you want to be going in the next 3 to 5 years? And then saying what type of research should you be mapping out against not just the customer experience, but again, your overall goals to be able to be helping as another way to be able to measure and then bring those customers into the measurement tools of how you're being successful. Again, not just looking at sales data and purchase and revenue, but also then how your brand is known over time and how that lays against more strategic goals and plans for you.
And the one thing I just want to say, only because you've got this slide up here, and I feel like we could dig into just this slide for the next hour, is and only because I was just working on a project just this morning of understanding not only where you are along the journey and what you want to be gathering from your customers and prospects, but where are they at right now? Like, what is it and what value are they going to be getting from giving you information in the beginning, right? Because just as of right now, of the number of surveys that are out there and response rates, and especially if it is, well, in multiple things, if it's surveys and trying to get responses, but even these days of just trying to gather data from your customers on all sorts of levels, what value are they going to be getting out of it, right? Of what's happening. And the way to understand that is what's happening in their mindset at this spot along the journey. So where are they? They just decided. And so they might have some hesitation, they're excited about this. And so they might be more likely to share insights. That's what we were just talking about, something of somebody just signed up and they're really excited. Let's gather some feedback from them. Then let's respond back to them, those types of things. So always taking a look, and Kate and I are always talking about this as the customer. There's people at the other end, but what are you trying to gather? But where are they at? So we can decide right question, right time, to the right person. Yes.
So again, today or right now, we're going to dig in more around the brand perception type things. And really, part of it is how do we get started on brand perception studies? But really, first, I want to talk about also why we at McKinsey are like so passionate about this, and that we really say that this we believe is one of the most truly powerful surveys that brands can be doing. And I think the biggest thing is really if it relates to the results applications. There's so many different ways, and then what those benefits are that you can be doing it. So again, as Jenny touched on a little bit more in terms of benchmarking. So doing this year over year and being able to measure what that awareness and perception is changing. And those are two different things. How do people in your community, how aware are they? And then what is the perception of your brand within your area of market that you're going to sell? They can guide your messaging strategy. So are there tweaks that you want to be able to do? As Jenny said too, if the perception is that it's difficult to work with you, but you do have some workarounds to be able to make that easier, some of that's just messaging, and you just need to actually just start telling people a little bit more about how they can actually take advantage of some of those easy to use tools that you have available. You can uncover it and address misalignments. It's understanding that competitive landscape mapping. That's another thing. We did a survey or a study with a nonprofit who was trying to understand what was the perception out in the market of who's solving XYZ problem or who's providing those types of services. With perception studies, you can do aided and unaided surveys where you're actually saying, who do you think is solving or doing these types of things? And then you can have a list of your competitive landscape there. And in that study, we actually found it came back that the general population had selected a nonprofit that actually does not solve for the problem that the client of ours solved for. So they said, well, that doesn't make any sense because they don't do X, Y, Z. And we said, well, that's actually, again, that's a misalignment and a messaging thing here, because you're actually not competing against them, but the perception out into the market. And that's, again, the reality. People may be in a nonprofit space, may be giving to this other nonprofit because they think that they're helping XYZ population, even though they're not. So it's good to be able to understand, again, what is the reality of your target audience and how do they think and perceive that? And then reputation management, again, is another one. So those are the
also, Kate, just really quick on that competitive, I just want to, which I think you were touching on, but I just want to say it again, is direct and indirect competitors. Mm-hmm. So this is like, who is your direct competitor? But in this space, going out and saying indirect competitors of like just share of wallet, of where are other things and other people that might be taking that share of wallet that might not be your direct competitor, but they could be, you know, like we've been talking about in the education space now, like having a direct competitor to a college or whoever, there is now online options. There's a ton of other options out there that might not be direct competitors. There's also things that are happening in the marketplace that will affect your brand one way or the other that might not have anything to do with you, but what's going on around there. I just only because I know, Kate, you've got someone going off to college, which she's
Yeah.
going off, but I do know even like the, is it free, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name, community college.
Oh, the DREAM Act. Yes,
the
it
DREAM
is
Act.
free to go to community college right after high school graduation in the state of California if you fill out an application to be able to do.
But I wonder, and that just got me thinking of, I've got lots of thoughts and opinions, or I mean, just even thoughts about it, and I don't actually know about what's going on. So will that affect it? Will it not affect it? Like I think colleges then, or universities, education spaces need to then be saying what's happening with their direct competitors, what's happening with their indirect competitors, what's happening in the landscape around them that will, and the reason why I bring it up, because it will affect perception against like other things that are happening is going to affect their perception about possibly the category that you serve and then your exact company as well. So even though your company might not have changed too much, things around it have. So just want to make sure on that competitive landscape that we're looking bigger than just your internal circle there.
Yeah, and I think, which I'll come right back to that point, Jen, on that, but just to highlight really quickly. So again, there's different ways to apply those applications, and then how you can start to benefit from it is that improved efficiency, and effectiveness. Those were two of the things that we talked about on the external elements that helps build a brand, optimizing your resources, mitigating risks, and increasing your ROI. So really being able to make data-backed decisions. And so really being able to go out as you go to try to get funding for your marketing efforts and those types of things, and being able to say, we did our due diligence. This is where we right now, how we're perceived in the marketplace. And then this is what's informing us and why we're making these decisions in terms of their marketing efforts. But I think too, coming back, even what you were just talking about, Jenny, and one of the points I really want to make on this slide is understanding or being able to clearly define what that overarching goal and objective is of the study. And you touched on it a little bit before. We want to make sure that we're not kitchen sinking any sort of survey out there for two main purposes and reasons. I mean, that's a big thing that we could get on a soapbox and talk about for a long time. But when you kitchen sink a survey and you put too many ideas, too many types of concepts, or you're trying to touch on too many spots along that customer journey, you're going to dilute the types of results that you're going to get, which makes those results less actionable. It doesn't mean that those results won't be great and that they won't be informative, but you can't go as deep because you can't ask as many questions. And then the other thing is that you really want to, again, thinking about the human on the other side of everything, is when you add too many types of topics, it can become confusing or just hard to follow in terms of the survey, in terms of from the respondent's point of view. So being able to be really clear about what your goal and objective is for each data collection point. Again, it doesn't even have to be a survey. That is what we're talking about here too. But when you're going out and looking at different types of things, if you're culling through call center data, when you're starting to look at that, if you don't have a focal issue and a focal type of objective or goal in that effort, you could just get overwhelmed by the amount of information. So being able to step back and clearly say, for this project, and that's where the strategy comes in. If you actually map out and say, over the course of 12 months, we want to have these many different goals and objectives, and then these will be the efforts and how we're going to collect that information through our customer insights. It's going to help you, again, be more strategic and how you can start utilizing that information. So really, again, focusing to be able to get these benefits and to be as most effective and efficient using the results of these studies, you have to be very clear around what your research objective is. And then as the project lead, being able to articulate that out to the rest of the team and being able to make sure that they're understanding that goal and objective is, sometimes Brent says that, we can't be moving the goalpost here. We have to make sure that we're staying focused. And as new ideas come in, we can say, that's great. We're going to add that to the strategy for going forward efforts. And then as we start to dig into next, what is the research questions, again, as we're talking about, but really as we think about what our goal and objective is of the study, let's say in this example, around the brand perception, we want to be able to, or we need to acknowledge the fact that different audiences are going to have different opinions. So are we going out to the general public and asking what their perception is? Are we going to target audience or prospects? So they've shown interest. So they already have some sort of idea about, who you are and that they're kind of interested. Are they new customers? So as Jenny said, that feeling of excitement, we do a lot in the power sports or boats, kind of marine industry. You spend a lot on a new motorcycle or a big, huge boat. Within that first, if you're sending out a survey in that first week, you would assume that they're going to feel super excited. But you also then want to be able to understand what is the perception and thoughts about your brand for existing customers. So people who have been with you for X period of time. Each one of these potential respondents or audiences, their information and their insights are extremely valuable. They are potentially going to be a little bit different. So you have to remember those types of nuances. I mean, it'd be great if you can get all of them and you do kind of different variations of studies and combine those together. But a lot of times you need to be really, again, going back up to what is the overall goal and objective of this study within your larger strategy. You then want to be able to say, who is it that we want to go after? Because if it is new customers and you want to make sure that you get them into a repeat, let's say, of that, you want to understand what their perception is. And again, you can track that again, use that as a benchmark. Your benchmark studies don't have to be just general population. Your benchmark studies can be within your customer population as well. So really being able to tie that back to your overall research study, that's one of those really important things. And then the types of topics that we generally would suggest within this type of study is just general position or general perceptions, market positioning. How do they think that you stand? Where do you fit in the larger scope? Either against if it's nonprofit space, how do you fit in with other nonprofits serving a similar population? Or is it how does your product fit against competitive landscape there? Product and service knowledge. So what do they know? How do they know how to engage with your brand and those types of things? Main value proposition, and then messaging, really of being able to test those types of things. This isn't specifically you're coming out with new messaging and you're wanting to test new creative and how it hits and connects with those customers. You're really wanting to be able to say, for a snapshot in time, what is that perception that is of your brand by whichever population it is that you're going after.
One of the things that I want to touch on just on that product and service knowledge there, that's a really important thing. A lot of times, it happens even at McKinsey. I was out with somebody yesterday and she says, I had no idea that you guys did that. And I'm like, how is that possible? I feel like I talk about it all the time, whatever this one service is that we do. But part of it is, what do people think about you overall? And then if you have multiple services, right? Do they think of you only as, at McKinsey, they only think about us as doing surveys or doing insights or doing foresight, or people say sometimes, I had no idea that you guys work in the power sports motorcycle space. Yes, we sure do. And we've been doing it for a long time. So what is the understanding and knowledge, not just of us overall, but of the service lines that we have? And that might also then figure out what, we need to put more emphasis on this service or this service. And that goes back to making sure your overall company objectives. If you're trying to grow a specific service line and people don't know that you have that service line, now where are we at? So brand perception, I just want to make sure that is a huge, huge thing. And or do they think about you for this, but your competitor for this? And then why would they go to your competitor over you for a certain type of thing versus others? So there's a lot of good nuances that are in here. And I'll just even say on that note, which is, I think one of my, like Kate said, our soapbox that I want to be in here, but there is so much potential with leaning into having a customer insights strategy of what this is. The amount of competitive advantage that you can have by being directly connected with your customers and the people that you serve, and digging in and digging deeper and doing it the right way. We are in this space, and I don't know how many billions of surveys are sent out. And I think that online tools are fantastic, these DIY tools. It has flooded the market with a lot of surveys out there, a lot of data collection. And just because people are collecting data, we are now back to that stat in the beginning. companies are not using or only using 30% of the data that they have. I think people are collecting not fantastic information because, to Kate's point on those respondents, if you're aggregating all of that information up, you're not going to have a competitive advantage because you're going to have an aggregated answer where we should be pulling this apart and say, okay, for this specific target, this is the messaging that they want. This is what's going on. So there's so much potential here of what's in here, and digging it in and not just looking things at the aggregate. What do they think overall? But what are some of your service lines? So I just think that service line and product knowledge is huge. Every one of these is, but that one I got a little pet project for.
Yes. Well, here we'll jump into this next slide here, Jen.
Oh yeah. Okay. So we went through, and any sort of questions, that we have on here, but so what we've now been doing is now, let's say, proactively filling in the gaps. So if then you went down the path with Katie and did this brand perception, brand awareness study of where we are and what's happening. I will say too that we had done a previous webinar where we really went into a bit more detail of some questions of how to ask and what to do and how to get feedback. But for this one, then let's say now we've come in and we've really nailed in, and now we're saying, okay, we've got our perception understanding of where we are and what's going on. And so now we can then start moving back, right? And then saying, okay, we've got this brand perception. Now we can figure out, where does it fit in the mix? Where does it fit in our overall strategy? And now we can start moving on to other pieces on here. I wanted to make that point too, Katie, when you were talking about a kitchen sink survey, and I think it's a commonly used phrase, but that basically is when people try and put every single question that they possibly have. Where I have found that happens most often is when there is not an overall research strategy, when there are ad hoc surveys that are happening. And because there's a survey going out, and so it might even start with, I know my clear objective, this is what I want, this is what we're going to do. Others start coming in from other areas and saying, hey, since you're sending out a survey, we should add this. Oh, since you're sending out a survey, we should add this. And it starts getting added in here. So protecting your goals and objectives of where it is, and then be able to stand back to these people and say, hey, listen, whoever it is, hey, listen, that's a great idea. We should ask that question on this survey over here. We should ask that question over here. Because another thing that I hear often is there are so many surveys and respondent fatigue. We don't want to send out too many surveys. But the thing is, if you have an overarching research strategy and we're asking the right people, the right question at the right time, you're not going to have survey fatigue, because every person is not going to get every single survey. They're going to get it when it makes the most sense in their life cycle. So sometimes then you can come back and say, that is a fantastic idea, Mr. Manager, whoever, owner. We actually asked that question over here on this survey, and this is the reason why we ask it there, as opposed to all coming together. So in here, we've got a lot of different things that we can be asking. We went down for a little bit down the brand perception survey rabbit hole, a little bit of down the path that Kate, some fantastic information to talk about the complexity of that. I also want to share that on our website, we also have there are 6 surveys that McKinsey, there's a lot of surveys that we do, but there are 6 standard surveys that we think every company should be doing. On our website, we have a Jumpstart, a free download that you can download it, but a Jumpstart survey overview talks about the 6 surveys that we believe every company should be doing, the topics that should be included, and how you can use the results. So there's some information on there that helps in order to gather that information. So I think I'll say it one more time, of ensuring we're asking the right question at the right time to the right people of what we have. So I think that there's a fantastic way of being able to come back and strategically having this information. So we have all of this information. We've got our free resource on our website of the different types of surveys that you do. And the other thing that I want to at least share as we wrap this up, and if there's any questions that we can cover, because this is a topic that we would love to dig into with everybody, but also doing overall research strategy workshops. So service that we provide at McKinsey, and making sure that later it's not, I didn't know that you did that, but we provide research strategy workshops. And in these workshops, it's really making sure of coming through and going through those 3 different the strategic approach that we have of laying out what is your overall objective. So typically it's with the senior management team. What is it that we're looking to accomplish? What do we currently have? And start deep diving into some of this information, where then we can start covering and mapping out some feedback opportunities, survey scheduling, so you can walk away with having some future plans of where we want to be, how we want to use the results. So if it's we don't have an insight strategy at all, and we want to start with something that works, or we have some surveys today, they're not really living up to the potential that we know they could. We know that there needs to be some missteps. How do we get people aligned? It's a fun workshop to be able to go through and to do there. So we offer those. And so today we were covering the the power of customer insights with brand building. So Kate, thank you for deep diving into the brand perception studies there. And then as we start opening this up. So if we have any, I'm always shocked at how fast the time goes. If there's any questions that we have, I know Brent is on our team, who's fantastic. If anyone has worked with Brent, if there's any questions that have come through or that you have.
Yeah, there was a question about when you had mentioned the importance of creating an overarching objective and clarifying that. Who should be involved in that process internally? And you don't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen, but at the same time, we're looking for actionable insights and want to make sure that they are relevant to, across the organization. So in your opinion, when you're coming up with that overarching objective, who should be involved in that process?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I can get started on answering, and then Jen definitely add in a little bit more. I think it's multi-layered in the sense of saying where is the project request starting from, and then again thinking about how those results are going to be used. And so if it's coming from like the marketing teams wanting to be able to do something and test against those types of about their marketing messaging, where are they at right now? I would also think like what's one layer out. So as we talked about, what is also your strategic plans that you have going on, and those going out there, you want to be able to identify somebody maybe up the chain to be able to also get their buy-in and their agreement on that overarching research objective before you get started, because you don't want to, again, as Jenny had given as an example, is you're going and presenting all of those results, and one or two layers up within the management structure, they say, but I thought we were going to ask about XYZ. So being able to, you could, within your team, within the department that's owning this study, you could come up with your research objective, and I would then say, go and present that to whoever you're going to be presenting those end results to. Set a pre-meeting, talk about what the objective is, where you're going to go, why you're going to be targeting this specific respondent base, and make sure that there's agreement and alignment kind of along the process with that would be one of my biggest recommendations. So it's not that they all have to have opinions as a part of that overarching research objective, but making sure that you're getting buy-in before you get started, because nobody ever wants to be at the spot of presenting results and then having somebody say, but I thought we were doing XYZ. So that would be one of my biggest tips.
Two things that I would add to that too is if we've got an overarching strategy and then we're laying that over our business goals and objectives, it's a lot easier, because part of this is one, getting their buy-in for this, but also getting budget for this, right? Is then if we're mapping this along, we say, hey, our objective is that we're growing sales, we're doing this, we're launching a new initiative. This is the research that we're doing that is going to be aligning with this. And therefore we're going to get this type of feedback so that we can maximize the dollars that we're spending, not making assumptions. We're not going on gut feel anymore. This is what we're doing. So one, trying to get budget. I would be aligning it to your business goals. The other tip always, if you're going to be presenting to anybody up, I always like asking and finding out what their assumption is about what the answer is. So we are not going in for research in order to bias research of what things are, but I always like to know what the people are that we're going to be presenting to. What is their hypothesis? For example, if we come in and we say, hey, we want to know, are we, how do people see us in the market? Are we number one in the market? Do people know who we are? Only a small percentage knows who we are. If I know the results are going to come back, or I'm assuming small percent even knows who we are, what the services are, I want to know what other people's hypothesis as well. What do you think it's going to be? That way we know going in what's happening there and what we're testing against, because your overall objective of what are we testing against is where we are. So I think that there's some good pieces there, but great question.
Yeah, I think even just really quickly on that, because Jenny,
So
you
much to dig into.
brought in there with the hypothesis. Gathering hypothesis is different than that overarching objective. So again, as part of those presenting what the overarching objective is, and then being able to say, and we'd like to get an understanding of what your hypothesis is so that we can address that at that end result.
And then we're testing and making sure that there are questions in. So different piece, and maybe this is one of our next one, is ensuring the right questions that we're asking on the surveys, right? So we've got our overall objective, we've got our hypothesis, then we can start designing our survey questionnaire and going through here. So next step, so this specific 3 steps was really just getting us to the point where now we're ready to launch our initiative of where we are and the types of surveys that we have. So we've decided in these webinars, so thank you everybody that joined us, of how do we start breaking these down and having these pieces, because we have such a passion for customer insights. We think every single company could be and should be leaning into them as our competitive advantage to be able to take pieces. If there's any information that we can share to make this better,
Yeah.
And as I say, rid the world of terrible surveys and terrible data collection out there, we're just doing our part to do that. So yeah. Brent, was there any other questions as we wrap up here, or anybody have any thing that we've got?
Nope, I think we're good.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks everybody so much for coming. And again, we'll be sending some follow-up going out. And again, if there's any topics or thoughts that you think would be really interested for future webinars, shoot us a note. We are definitely wanting to customize this to make sure that it's relevant and informational for you. So thanks everybody.
Thank you.